Honor was their code. We are the Spy-Fi guys, and this is Windtalkers. Welcome to the Spy-Fi guys, where we cover spy facts, spy fiction, and everything in between. I'm Christian.
And I'm Zach.
And we are back with the 2002 film Windtalkers.
That's right, and we have a guest joining us this week to cover that movie.
Hello, I'm ZJ. You may remember me from Tora 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 and the other movie.
The Longest
Day.
The Longest Day. So, this is the only film so far you've come on that was not produced by that one guy who was the producer of both those movies.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, that's a great point. As far as we know.
Yeah, that's true. It's also, I think, those two are, similar producers, but also just very similar in tone. This one is quite different, so it'll be interesting to get your take on that.
Very early 2000s, and also simultaneously very John Woo.
You know, let's get into that later, but I don't think so.
Interesting.
So yeah. I requested this movie because Christian likes codes and ciphers. ZJ likes World War II movies. I like movies about unsung heroes, and all three of us like Nicolas Cage. So I thought it would be the perfect choice. Wait, do you not?
No, I enjoy Nicolas. I'm not a biggest fan of him as, say, I am of Tom Cruise, but I enjoyed some Cage.
Well, you got plenty of Cage to go around this time.
Yeah.
So yes, as we discussed, this is from 2002, stars Nicolas Cage, as well as some other familiar faces, and is directed by John Woo, who we last saw in Mission Impossible 2.
Yeah, a very different film than Mission Impossible 2. And our other main character, who I would say debatably the main character, Ben Yazzie, is played by Adam Beach, who is quite a notable Native American actor, especially in there was a seminal film, I believe called Smoke Signals, I watched in high school, which was one of the sort of seminal films of Native filmmaking. But also, you may remember him or not as Slipknot from Suicide Squad.
Well, he looked familiar.
About 10 minutes in, his head blows off. He's the one who they kill off to say, "Oh, we mean business. We're killing off characters." Except no one's ever heard of this character.
That is a very memorable part of the movie.
Surprisingly enough, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, had to point that out.
All right, so shall we get into the movie?
Sure.
Okay, so first, of course, we have our poetry synopsis.
Oh, boy.
So, ZJ, did you do a poem for us as well?
Oh, I did not. I got caught up in checking my naval history facts.
All right. Exciting.
So I did a couple, so I'll begin with my haiku. Marines on Saipan. Code talkers save many lives. Childs changes ways.
Childs?
Yeah, that's Noah Emmerich's character.
Oh, I did not remember.
I thought it was Chick.
Yeah, I thought it was Chick as well.
Did I mess it up again?
I mean, it could be his, like maybe Chick's just the nickname. Let's find out.
Oh, it says Chick on IMDb.
Yeah.
Should I go back and say it correctly?
Well, sure. But no, actually, leave in your error.
I did that with Johnny English last time. I got it right. Wrong. Yeah. It's just tradition. Okay, so then here's the limerick. There once was a sergeant named Joe who teamed up with a young Navajo. They performed combat runs, redirected some guns. Their story is one you should know.
Ooh, that's really good, Zach.
Thank you. Yeah. Got very wholesome at the end.
Quite sort of the antithesis of a usual limerick.
That usually has a dark ending, yeah.
Or, they're dirty.
Or something like that, yeah. So here is the real plot summary from IMDb. 2 U.S. Marines in World War II are assigned to protect Navajo Marines who use their native language as an unbreakable radio cipher.
Alrighty. So we are introduced to our two main characters, Private Ben Yazzie and Sergeant Joe Enders. And they're introduced in very different ways. Ben is leaving his home in Arizona. I believe it's Monument Valley, saying goodbye to his family and getting on a bus with other Navajo men. Whereas Joe is in a jungle, in a firefight.
Yeah, it totally seemed like a Vietnam War.
Yeah. He's trying to save his men. They need to hold their position, one or the other, and all of his men start dying around him. And then Joe is hit by a grenade and fade to black. The first of many fade to blacks here.
Right. After telling everybody, we are not going to run, we're going to hold our position. And someone's like, damn you, Joe Enders.
Oh, yeah, as he's dying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For holding their position, they sure ran around quite a bit.
Well, they also were like surrounded and like it wasn't clear. Well, I guess that's the point of the movie, right? Is that they're following their orders blindly, as it's later revealed, for no reason, and they all die pointlessly.
Was it revealed there was for no reason? I thought that they said your own platoon or whatever was ambushed because the Japanese cracked the code or something. They were using on Guadalcanal.
That is correct. And
I thought it was like they were just ordered to hold position, even though their position itself, they didn't really need it. But I don't know. That's jumping ahead.
Both things could be true. But,
yeah.
So we go over to Ben, and the other code talkers are sworn into the Marines. They're given training to be code talkers. They're given one of my favorite of the. So I guess we'll explain a little bit about how the code works. So it's not just speaking in Navajo. There's also a code to it. Like, obviously, the original Navajo language didn't have words for things like tank and artillery. So they have to use similar things or things called, so a tank is a tortoise or chadoga. I believe it's,
Yeah, they say that in the movie.
Yeah. That one's my favorite, though. It's like a tortoise. Yeah.
What was the other one they said? Iron fish was the one for submarine, I think.
Yeah. And then I think the artillery was my other favorite is a lot of guns, basically.
Yeah, it's like many loud guns or something like that. I was hoping that they would explain a little bit more in the movie about how exactly the code worked and why it was so unbreakable. And they kind of did it.
They do have exhibits on it in the Spy Museum and the National Cryptologic Museum. But from what I remember, it's just so different than any language that the Japanese have come across. But also, as they say later on, it's not just speaking in Navajo. Like, if there's also a code aspect to it. But yeah, I don't know. I'd be interested to learn more. Actually, I don't know. That's about all I know.
I was curious as well because in looking it up, apparently there was a serviceman, a Marine serviceman in one of the artillery brigades that was stationed in in the Philippines, who was captured by the Japanese at the beginning of the war, who was Navajo and could speak Navajo.
Yeah, that's in the movie.
Well, but he wasn't tortured to death by the Japanese. And according to the story I read, he actually was in Hiroshima when it was bombed. So quite the story there.
Yeah, wow.
But was tortured to try to reveal the code, but was able to make out some words, but not able to discern the content of the messages, I suppose. It did seem, though, to me, from the little I read about the code you were talking about, Christian, that if given those specific words, it didn't seem like it was the most heavily encrypted of codes, I guess. I don't know. So I would be curious to learn more about that as well, because just on it sounds like it did rely not just on the specific code words that they were using, but just the difficulty of comprehending even similar dialects of the language. I think one of the quotes from one of the people was something like, someone from the next town over couldn't have understood us or something.
Right. Zach, this sounds like a great idea for a microdot.
Yeah, exactly. This is not the Imitation Game. It's more like a traditional horror movie in a lot of ways.
We find Joe recovering in Kaneohe Bay, Hawaii.
Yeah, did you like that?
I did like that. He was having some PTSD flashbacks. Joe is a jerk to a nurse, Rita. He tries to walk, but he's a mess.
Yeah, and we learned that his name is Joe Enders, and I thought a good alternative name for this movie would be Ender's Game.
Oh, I knew. As soon as you said that, I knew it was going. So Rita tries to convince him to stay, but no, he is intent on going back to the front.
What a great hero that Joe is.
He's a damn good Marine.
He's the greatest generation.
So he goes through tests for his perforated eardrum, which Rita helps him cheat.
Yeah.
So he can be put back into the field. So we get some more code talker training. I like this part. There's some timed transcription, and as they're doing the timing, the trainer is putting pressure on them as well, shouting, "We need this now, 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 now!" And Ben's friend Charlie does really well at that.
So it's funny how the Ben story is such a traditional war movie. Like, he's at home with his wife and kids, and then he goes to boot camp, and then he goes to war, and so on. But yeah, like, I was surprised that it didn't have them, like, literally firing guns, like, right next to their heads while they were doing it.
You mean like in The Last Samurai?
Yeah, that was something. I'm glad you brought up Last Samurai, because Windtalkers is like Last Samurai, and also Dances with Wolves, where everyone made fun of it when it first came out, because although the movie is supposedly about people of color, they have a white guy on the cover to sell the movie.
Yeah. I mean, I have many varied thoughts on The Last Samurai. Well, let's not get into it here.
We'll not get into it. Do you generally like it, though?
Oh, I love that movie, but I have many
There's
thoughts.
a lot to say.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyways, back to this movie, which we will find out my opinions on. We also here get a brief glimpse of Christian Slater, who plays a character named Ox, who's another Marine.
Because he's from Oxnard.
Right. Yes, not because of...
He's built like an ox, because he's definitely not.
Joe is getting his record read by Major Melitz, who is played by Jason Isaacs. The only time we see him in this movie, sadly.
Right.
We find out that Joe's last posting was the Solomon Islands. Melitz says that the Japanese have broken every code that they have, including when they were in the Solomon Islands. So Joe's going to be paired with one of the code talkers and will be protecting him.
Right.
Also, at this point, I started to wonder if this or Pearl Harbor had more use of the word Japs.
I feel like it was Pearl Harbor.
I don't know. They say it a lot here. Like, a lot.
Heck of a lot.
So, also, Joe is not just there to protect the code talker, he's there to protect the code. So he has orders to kill the code talker if they get captured.
This is a great moral dilemma. It's a great way to start the movie off.
So we see Joe getting back into his training. He's running on a beach, and Ben and Charlie arrive at that same base. This is where Joe meets Ox, and yes, he's from Oxnard, California. That's why he's got his nickname. I forget what his actual name is.
Yeah.
Joe and Charlie are asking the other Marines for directions, but of course they're jerks and don't tell them where to go.
Yes. When Ben meets Joe, he makes a very bad first impression.
Yep, he spills his food all over, or his drink all over Joe, and then spills Joe's drink, spills his own drink. Not off to a great start.
I mean, it almost seems like he was doing it intentionally at one point. Or maybe Adam Beach just wasn't selling the physical comedy part of it.
Oh no, I bought that. That worked for me. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was like, I'd be scared if I were him.
So Ox is playing poker with some other Marines, including Joe. There's rumors that they'll be shipping out next week. This reminded me of, was it The Longest Day? Or was it Tora? When they're like, not sure when they're shipping. I think it was The Longest Day.
It was definitely Longest Day.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, this card game has Noah Emmerich, who plays Chick, as we discussed earlier. So Noah Emmerich, we last saw him in The Americans. He was the next door neighbor.
I forgot about that. Yeah.
Yeah, but he's around. He's in tons of stuff.
Yeah. Also, here is Mark Ruffalo, whose character's name I do not remember. So he is just Mark Ruffalo in my notes.
He's the Greek.
Yes.
But he is very Mark Ruffalo. And by that I mean Mark Ruffalo before the MCU.
What does that mean?
I mean, he was just very, like, if you ever watch Collateral.
Yeah, but I don't remember him in it.
He's in it, but he's very shouty and panicky.
Oh, so he's like the nervous guy?
Yeah. That's it. Like, they knew, man. They knew. That's all.
That's him.
That's him, yeah. Charlie and Ben are invited to join the game. One of the soldiers is a jerk to him. I think it's Chick. Are we seeing a pattern? People are jerks in this movie.
Right.
So the orders come in. They ship out tomorrow morning to Saipan. It's a stepping stone to Tokyo. Mark Ruffalo is looking hesitant, but everyone else is pretty gung-ho. Joe has another PTSD flashback when he's looking at a fan.
Yeah, so I wanted to make a comment here. When they're doing the briefing,
Yeah.
maybe you guys can help me remember this.
Okay.
Okay, so someone's making a briefing to the Navajo, and they say, we're going to take their home, the Japanese home. Like, this is a Japanese island.
Yeah.
And I wondered if the movie was doing some kind of, like, dramatic irony where it's like Native Americans are taking somebody else's home.
Yeah, I think that
maybe
that stood out to me as well, Zach, and I think it was deliberate.
I actually didn't notice it, but yeah, it's entirely possible. Yeah,
this movie isn't that smart most of the time.
Okay, I'm not to say it's not that. It's not that subtle.
There you go.
I didn't find it particularly subtle, so I think you're both right.
Yeah.
I mean, I kind of feel like if that's what they're going for, they would have had a conversation like, don't you think it's ironic that we're taking someone else's home? Yeah.
Not about taking someone else's home, but about the history of the...
Yeah, after Joe has his PTSD flashback, he goes outside and vomits, and Ben goes to check on him, gives him some lifesavers to help with the taste, and Ben is like, what are you doing here? He's like, well, I'm offering you lifesavers. No, and what are you doing here? I'm just trying to serve my country.
Yeah, Enders doesn't think he can do it. He doesn't think he can be a code talker.
Nope.
Which, I'm kind of like... Would he say that if he met anybody, or was it just Ben specifically? I mean, Ben is not the toughest guy in the world.
Yeah, I think it's because he had the bumbling, first impression.
But I did like, it's not one of my favorite lines, so I'm going to say it now, but I like the part where he was like, let's see you do it with bullets flying over your head.
So they have a going away party, basically, where, all the men are celebrating as they ship out. Rita then comes to say goodbye to Joe, gives him some meds to help his ear. They have a drink together. Here I have written down slow motion shot, but I don't remember what the slow motion shot was.
You're gonna have to be more specific.
Actually, I didn't notice that many slow motion shots.
Really? I thought it was ubiquitous.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, just a couple like guys getting hit in slow mo.
Yeah,
like I don't remember a slow mo part here.
Yeah, I don't remember what it was here. Maybe
I don't remember the slow mo part there either. But I did text Zach while I was watching the movie. If they played the slow mo combat scenes at full speed, this movie would be under an hour.
I feel like it's not as egregious here as in some other John Woo movies.
I totally believe that.
Yeah.
By the way, were there any doves in this movie?
I was looking. I didn't see a single dove, and I was disappointed.
That's especially so sad.
Especially after the moment in Mission Impossible 2, which I describe as peak John Woo, where there's the there's the flames, slow motion, and a dove flies through the frame. Yeah,
right. I mean, especially because this is a war movie, War and Peace. It's a whole thing.
Maybe doves. Anyway. There just were no doves in Saipan.
That's the one thing that he's committed to for that historical accuracy.
Yeah. Speaking of Saipan, we get to Saipan, but it's really cool little ranch in Hawaii. Just in this scene, imagine amongst all of that, there's also what's his face from Jurassic Park and a bunch of dinosaurs, flying
Dr. Grant.
Yeah, Dr. Grant and the kids running. And those dinosaurs were chasing them as they jump over a log. This is the exact same place that's filmed.
Funny you should mention that, because I kept trying to place the major or whoever in charge of who they kept taking orders from, Helmstad or something.
Is that Gunny?
Yeah, Gunny. And I kept trying to figure out what I had seen him in. I was scrolling back, and he was in Jurassic Park 2. Jurassic...
Oh, like the hunter guy?
Yeah, Dieter. So I was like, Jurassic Park, and also filmed at the same spot in Hawaii. So, yeah.
Although was Lost World filmed in Hawaii as well? I actually don't know.
That's a good question. I'm not sure.
I've actually visited, well, that's going on 10 years now. I think is the last time I was at Kualoa Ranch, but I recall that they have a movie tour there, and one of the things they show you is Jurassic Park. They also show you like trenches from Windtalkers, if I recall.
All right. But yeah, the attack scene looks really good. I like the ships in the distance. I like that they're using the tanks. The tank gets hit.
Yeah, there's Japanese, a singular Japanese plane flying overhead, big artillery.
Japanese plane? I don't remember that, but
I think it was a bomber.
Oh, okay. It was a bomber. I see. Before they land.
Yeah.
I did note that the tanks look great because they clearly someone on the procurement team or whatever had a great time getting all these tanks, and they really committed to filming them running back and forth with Marines behind them in every direction and blowing them up several times and stuff, which is great. But I was struck by the archival footage of Iowa class battleships firing.
I was wondering about that. So let's lead up to that point.
Okay.
So yeah, Ox and Charlie and Ben and Joe are in separate parts. Joe is, clearing a path through the Japanese soldiers, and Ben is horrified.
Yeah,
Joe's got some issues.
Yeah, it's like Captain Picard with the Tommy gun.
Yeah.
And Adam Beach is like Lily saying, you were almost enjoying it.
So we also get some men caught in barbed wire, and Joe drags a Marine back to Ben, and he has to help the medic, it's like that scene in Pearl Harbor where the nurse has to put her hand on the guy's or fingers on the guy's artery because he's bleeding out.
Yeah, there's the cliche here where Joe gets angry and that allows him to fight better rather than just making him reckless and then he gets killed. But I did have a question for you guys, especially ZJ, which is, so these guys are the code talkers. They're a signals regiment. Why are they on the front lines?
I think it's because when you're in the Marines and when you're landing on an occupied island on a beach, everyone's in the front line.
Okay, no matter what your actual job is.
Yeah, because I think that in order to do his job and convey the information from the front where it's needed,
he has to be in the front.
Yeah, I was actually struck by that as well, and I was kind of curious and was trying to figure out, well, what were the casualty rates among Navajo code talkers and such. Yeah. And of the, I believe, 400 something code talkers who served, 13 were killed in action.
Oh, wow.
And of the original 29 who kind of formed the core nucleus of the group initially, 1 was killed.
Oh, wow.
And that was, where was that? Palaleo, I think.
How many of them got killed by their own people to protect the code?
Apparently, there's a number of them told stories about, number one, having been captured by their own troops who thought they were Japanese. And so that
will come into play later.
Yeah. And then additionally, it was apparently John Woo took the inspiration from the Navajo code talkers who recalled that their escorts were instructed to kill them in order to avoid capture. But
there's no official record.
Yeah, the official record for that doesn't seem to exist, but I don't know.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if it had happened if they had covered it up. Isn't World War II one of the most censored wars in history? I think I read that somewhere.
No. Right. So we also have some flamethrower action here, and this is also where Joe needs Ben to tell the Navy where to fire to take out the guns, and the USS California gets the message. The Japanese intercept it, but don't understand it. And here's where we get, the footage. That was interesting to me.
Yeah.
Because it looks archival, but then there's also some weird CGI going on with it.
So it is archival footage, which may or may not have been colorized, which might be part of the reason that it looks odd. What I found odd is that they didn't use archival footage of the California firing. They used archival footage of the Iowa firing, which isn't, the most egregious thing for the Battle of Saipan. But it just struck me as interesting. I think we caught a glimpse of some cruisers firing in there too. But just the fact that the archival footage was such visibly different quality than the rest of it.
That was interesting.
My assumption is that they had said, we'll use archival footage for this. They didn't realize that the quality was different. And, what are you going to do? Pay for a CGI shot in 2002 of a battleship firing?
I mean, Pearl Harbor, there was good CGI in there, but I don't think there was anything of the battleships actually firing.
Yeah.
But there was great shots of them exploding.
And a lot of that wasn't CGI, wasn't it? I think that
there were some.
I feel like it was a mix of CGI and other effects. Because I remember also that they used footage of the actual naval base at Hawaii, which is authentic in its own way. But unfortunately, the naval base at Hawaii now has very different ships than it did in 1940s and even looks different then.
Right. But, I mean, certainly this movie did not have the Pearl Harbor budget.
No. And I also noticed that all of the planes doing bomber runs were F-6F Hellcats, which you would have probably expected a wider diversity of U.S. naval planes bombing.
I knew that was going to show up sooner or later.
Yes, that's why you asked me here, Zach.
Yeah.
So.
Right, that's why I brought you on. So the ships are very effective, and I had a realization watching all the Japanese blow up, which is that watching Japanese soldiers get killed is not as fun as watching Nazis get killed.
Well, because they actually, I'm going to stop before I make this and make some comments. And ZJ, you probably knew exactly what I was going to say. I was like, no, there were some terrible things they did too.
Yeah. I watched Indiana Jones, Raiders of the Lost Ark over the weekend, and it was a lot more fun watching them blow up.
Yeah, exactly.
And, face melt.
Do you also feel like what the Pacific kind of ruined World War II? The Pacific and Band of Brothers kind of ruined World War II battles for us because this is no Pacific.
I never made it
much faker.
Pacific.
Yeah, I felt like the Pacific brought a lot of authenticity and really strove for authenticity. I did not feel that these battles strove for authenticity. I feel like they strove for narrative clarity and action.
And excitement. Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of Nicolas Cage firing from the hip with his machine gun, riddling multiple Japanese enemies with bullets.
Yeah, so speaking of, we get some trench fighting. Ben has to kill a Japanese soldier at point blank. They both got their rifles at each other. He can't fire, so Joe comes up behind the Japanese soldier and slits his throat.
Oh my goodness.
Did anyone else feel that this movie very, very carefully rationed their violence to avoid probably an NC-17 rating? Because we get, that shot is oddly bloodless. Mm-hmm. And then, we get a very, very, and this is a spoiler for later, but we get a very, very brief shot of Christian Slater's head on the gun.
Oh, yeah.
It's like 1 or 2 frames or something. And I feel like that's...
Funny that you mentioned that. There is a director's cut that is 153 minutes long, so even longer than this one, which is basically all the stuff they edited out so it didn't get an NC-17 rating.
Wow.
The fighting in the Solomon Islands in the beginning was pretty gruesome, too. Hand gets cut off or something like that. Yeah.
Anyway, so Joe takes a satchel charge to a bunker. The other people provide smoke cover. He throws it in. It bounces out. He has to throw it back. Explosion. Big victory.
What a hero, again.
So the codetalkers are given a new password. I enjoy a good, back and call and response spy talk.
Right.
So the challenge is wind, and the answer is talkers. Apparently, this is what the others and from the Navajos call these people, the Windtalkers. And as they would say in a what is that? Everything Wrong or Cinema Sins. Roll credits.
Yeah. I really actually quite like the banter back and forth between them. I thought that added an interesting idea of, here are these people in the middle of combat kind of like chatting with each other because they're the only people who are understanding each other.
Right.
And I did wish that we got a lot more of that.
Or even to see the perspective of who he's talking to.
I think we very briefly got that where we see someone write down and transcribe something and hand it off to someone else when the California is going to fire.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, that's right. Oh, so do you think it's the guy on the California he's talking to?
Yeah.
Okay, I was never clear actually who he was talking to, but that makes sense.
Nice.
Anyway, so Mark Ruffalo and the other Marines are reminiscing. One is worried about his girl cheating on him. And they're trying to give them all some personality because they're otherwise just a bunch of white dudes that I can't tell
Classic
apart.
war movie problem.
Yeah. Charlie is doing a ceremony with Ben with smoke off to the side. So Ben goes the next day to take a bath in the river. His gear is all on a rock. One of the jerk Marines, who I realize is Chick now, stops him and points a gun at him. It says the only difference between him and the Japanese is the uniform. Chick hits him
he's a real jerk.
Yeah, hits him with a rifle. Ben gets him on the ground, is punching him. They roll off. It's an all-out brawl. When they do stop it, Chick makes some excuse about, thinking that he was Japanese. Right. So later, Ben explains what the ceremony was. It's a Navajo protection ceremony. Joe is dismissive about this whole thing.
The classic buddy, two opposites attracting, kind of bouncing off of each other. But Christian, I have a part here, if you'll indulge me, where I rewrite the movie.
Oh, no.
You know how I like to do that? Hey, whatever. Sometimes it's good. So there's a part where Ben asks Joe, do you ever see ghosts? Do you remember this part?
Yes.
And he just says no. I would have had him have a PTSD flashback and then have him say all the time.
Well, he doesn't say no. He says that's enough stupid questions for the day.
Yeah, right. Anyway, I would not say all the time.
It's not.
It's not no. It's not yes. Yeah. We get another musical moment. I liked all the music in the movie.
This is Charlie, who's playing the native instrument, like the flute or some equivalent. And Ox is interested in him, and so he brings out a harmonica and tries to jam with him, which I like the blending.
Yeah, I have a note here, Death Flag. I'm not sure for which of them. I think it was for Charlie. Yeah.
Yeah, it's got to be for Charlie, right?
So was all of them reminiscing, and the one
one
Marine saying,
like,
"Give this to my girl, if my wife." Yeah. So you get some more transmissions in Navajo from the California to expect some light resistance.
Mm-hmm.
Also, Rita writes Joe, things are apparently rough at the hospital. There's definite shades of Pearl Harbor here, which is funny because it only came out a year earlier, and it was probably in production long before the Pearl Harbor came out.
That is a weird coincidence.
Filming around the same time, actually.
In the same place?
Different parts of Hawaii. Apparently, this film was actually supposed to come out in November 9, 2001, so it was definitely filming at the same time. We
were talking about taglines earlier. One of them was America has the last word. That's a very post 9/11.
Okay, completely unrelated, but ZJ, apparently those F6F Hellcats are CG.
Yes, I saw that featured prominently on the Wikipedia page, and it was very obvious from the film. They did a fine job. That wasn't like it wasn't as bad as some of the early footage in Red Tails, but it was
Red Tails, which came out how many years after?
5, I think.
At least. No, even more, probably.
I thought it was 2008 or something, or 2000.
Yeah,
anyway. But they were very visibly CGI, which is why I think that they couldn't have afforded to CGI a boat if they couldn't afford to CGI more than one type of plane.
Probably.
Yeah, it's like in Star Trek Picard where they copy and paste one ship over and over. Of course, So anyway, back to the movie. I like the part where they're walking away and they leave the graves behind. That was very poignant.
Yeah. So there's a montage of them traveling. Ben is writing a letter to his son, which, Joe immediately says, "What are you doing?" They don't want, any letters going with a postmark to the reservations. Ben at this point tries a cigarette. I was expecting the classic, coughing and hacking kind of thing, but no, we don't actually see that.
This movie's not that cliched.
But it is cliched in that as soon as there's a down moment or just a beat, explosions. So the trucks get hit by explosions. They dismount to take cover. Ben gets hit, but it's only the radio, and that took the full blast of it. And they find out quickly that it's friendly fire. They were on the wrong road.
Miscommunications getting people killed. It's almost like communications are important.
The Japanese are up ahead. Someone gets their leg blown off, and someone else tries to go and be the hero and rescue them, and they're both blown.
Right, so everyone is sad at this part. I was like, someone dies, and I don't know who it is.
I think it's the one who was like, my wife is,
the guy who's like, I'm going to get killed, and I'm going to... He was the guy who overcame his fear and went and picked up the other guy to save him, and then they both got blown up.
Yeah.
So, it was... I don't know if it was ironic, but it was...
It's just war is cruel, man. It doesn't always follow good stories.
I was actually surprised by that moment, like when they both exploded. I thought that was going to be, all right, he's going to make it. They're going to bring them back, but then one of them is going to get shot up on the way, not just both,
blown up.
Yeah, exploded.
Yeah, I also have a note around here. Jeep hit, sweet.
Yeah, it like flips over, and I was like, wow, those can't be stunt guys.
It was a good effect.
Yeah. So at this point, Ben and Joe are next to a dead Japanese soldier. Ben gets an idea. He's going to put on the Japanese uniform and get to one of their radios and tell the Americans to stop firing on him.
Yes, he's going to commit a war crime.
At his point, Mark Ruffalo is doing his best Mark Ruffalo exasperated shouting. And Joe is going to go with him as the classic prisoner in disguise.
Yeah,
trick.
It's basically the same thing they did in Return of the Jedi.
Ah, yes.
It's in a bunch of movies, sure.
But you don't usually see it deployed in war films.
Joe also puts like a pistol in the small of Ben's back so that he can reach that. we find out here that Joe speaks Japanese. He's like telling the Japanese soldiers, please don't hit me and all that. And as this is going on, the rest of the group is causing a distraction. Ben hits Joe, gets him crawling on the ground, and, is also causing it a big distraction. And then Joe grabs the gun that he had placed in the small of Ben's back, shoots a bunch of men. At this point, Ben has to finally kill a soldier. He does with like a bayonet.
Yeah, this part kind of reminded me of a video game, to be honest. When Joe has the pistol, he's running around shooting everybody.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Also, how they like just appear out of the woods behind the Japanese. Like, why wouldn't they just like send more than 2 people back there? I don't know. It just seemed...
It's like, how do they get there?
Yeah. Must have been one of those effects too expensive to show.
Sure. So this whole thing about Ben disguising himself as a Japanese soldier reminded me of one of Jay's stories. Listeners may remember Jay from the Mission Impossible movies. So Jay is Korean American, but he said that when he was at RIT, he had long hair, and Native Americans would come up to him and be like, "What tribe are you?" And he would keep telling them that he wasn't. They didn't believe him.
Wow.
He tells it better. You'll have to ask him next time you see him. Question.
All right. But yeah, so Ben gets on the radio and transmits victory.
All right.
So Enders, or not, that's the first time I called him Enders. Ben has a colonel, or not, sorry, Ben. Joe has a colonel who's looking for him. It's confusing because, what's his name? Nicolas Cage's character in the National Treasure movie's name is Ben. So when I think Ben
Oh my.
Crosses wires from there. So Joe has a colonel who's looking for him, and he's recommended for accommodation, but he's like, the colonel's like, why wait here? I'm just going to give you this pin right now. And he gets is it a silver star?
I don't know. I just have Ender accommodation in my notes. Yeah.
And there's the distinct dramatic irony of, he's getting a medal for, saving a lot of men as he's literally standing in front of the graves that are not even filled in yet.
Yeah. And of course, Ben doesn't get anything.
Yeah. Well, Joe does actually try to recognize Ben's part in the whole thing, but the colonel is dismissed.
Do you think it's left ambiguous as to whether it's because of his race or just because he's a lower rank?
No, I think it's...
No, it's not ambiguous.
It's not ambiguous.
This movie is not that subtle.
No,
yes,
it's not
you're
that
right.
subtle.
We've discussed that.
But Joe gives Mark Ruffalo the medal to send to the dead soldier's wife. And we find Joe drinking near the graves. He's got another letter from Rita. He gives Ben some sake that, he'd found. Mm-hmm. Joe says he doesn't care about the medals. He said he threw his first one in the ocean. I think that was the silver star that he got.
Oh, okay.
Tells a story about how he was left in charge, but all of his men around him died, which sounds like the scene from the beginning, and I'm pretty sure that's what he was talking about.
Yeah. Hearing that, it made me think it didn't sound like he was set up for success.
No.
Because didn't he say that all the actual commanding officers had been killed, like the lieutenant and both the sergeants had already died? So he would have been gone from commanding, I don't know, 4 people to commanding 16 people or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I'll do it.
Yeah. And there were only 4 left by that point that we've catch up with them in the beginning. But yeah, so Ben tries to make Joe feel better, and at this point Joe is starting to have doubts about his orders. And he goes out drinking among the graves. It has another PTSD episode.
Right.
And Ben, takes care of Joe, brings him back to his bunk, and takes out one of the cigarettes and uses the smoke and ash from the cigarettes for a protection ceremony, much like the one that Charlie did.
I guess they have to do it every few weeks or whatever.
Well, no, that last one was for
Ben, not
Ben.
For...
This one is for Joe.
I see.
Gotta
ward
more
off
than
the
that.
spirits.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So they're on the road to the next village, and here's where we get some more death flags, where Ox says he's trying to get the yogurt, specifically strawberry yogurt, to catch on. We find out that Charlie's family has a bunch of sheep, so he'll be managing those when he goes back. Mark Ruffalo wants a fleet of taxis and move back to Italy, to the motherland.
No, Greece.
Oh, is it Greece? No, sorry, that's Greece.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Santorini.
And
he talks
we
about
find Ben. Ben wants to teach American history, which Chick, of course, scoffs at and is like, "What? We have him teaching about scalping Custer?"
It's maybe we could use his perspective.
Right. Whereas Joe has zero plans.
He seems like the kind of guy who doesn't expect to survive the war.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And they arrive at the village and as soon as they do, the families look like they're going into hiding as the Americans come. Joe sees a kid with a bandage on his head, gives him some painkillers, and Ben notices this pet the dog moment.
I said it's a saves the cat moment. That's funny.
Yeah. Ben wants Joe to visit Monument Valley when all of this is over, which, death flag.
So is this the part where he says he considers himself to be a soldier of Christ?
No, it's not exactly. What he said is when he was getting confirmed, they told him that he was a soldier of Christ, and he said, somewhere I must change regiments or something to that effect.
Oh, okay. So this reminds me of a story. So my first job out of college, one of my guys that I was very friendly with, because it was a job where you like lived there. It was like a summer camp type situation, but not exactly. So one of the guys that I was very friendly with had a big cross tattoo on his arm, and I asked him about it once, and he said, so he's just graduated from college and he wants to join the army because he sees himself as a soldier of God. And he was like, does that make you uncomfortable? And I was like, well, no, but telling people about it, yes. Like it's like believing it is fine. Telling people about it, not so much.
Yeah, I don't know what it is about that, but yeah, I can see that. Moment where Joe goes speak to Gunny, who's the head of the whole. What, I don't know. In Marines, is it called a regiment? What is it?
DJ, do you know?
I'm not sure. I'm pretty unclear on these command structures.
Exactly what a gunny does. I think he is in charge of training, right? But then I guess he also fights with them.
He's the platoon sergeant. So, platoons?
Okay. By the way, my note here is this is when I realized that Ben's last name is Yazzie and not Yahtzee. Like the game.
Yeah, no. Anyway, so Joe wants out of his detail. He shouts at Gunny, I can't do my duty. And we get a touching moment with the flamethrower guy and a Japanese kid, where he's like giving the Japanese girl who's crying some chocolate. When, of course, this touching moment, like I said, every time there's some sort of a what's the word phrase I'm looking for? Just a touching moment, or just a
nice moment,
a nice moment of rest, or that gets interrupted by explosions, or at this point a gunshot, where he's like shot in the shoulder. There's a Japanese attack. He gets hit a bunch of times and explodes.
Yeah, literally explodes because he has a flamethrower. You also have the part with the dumb kid cliche, where the kid is like just sitting there crying.
Well, not dumb, shocked.
I thought it was funny that he's like, quickly, the chocolate, and he throws the chocolate, and the child follows it like a like it's a video game.
Like a dog.
Yeah.
This is kind of funny though.
So the whole village is like, but he's still not dead. So Joe gives him a mercy shot.
Right.
And the whole village is basically destroyed during this firefight. Charlie managed to save Chick's life with like throwing his knife.
Yeah, you'll kill the guy behind you when you think you're going to kill them cliche.
Yeah. And at this part, Charlie is taking down a ton of Japanese soldiers with a knife.
He's great.
And, Ox is fighting side by side with him. Ox gets stabbed. And then, Charlie gets injured as well. And there's a bunch of soldiers surrounding them. He thinks about killing Charlie, even says, I can't let them take you. And then changes his mind. Instead tries to save him, and as he's saving him, he gets his head cut off by a Japanese soldier with a katana.
So I gotta say, guys, although I like Charlie and Christian Slater, them dying does raise the stakes. I just wish it had been earlier in the movie, because it's so close to the end that it's like...
There's like another hour of the film left.
I don't think this is close to the end. Yeah.
Well, I just have a lack of notes, I suppose.
Yeah. At this point, Charlie gets captured. Joe sees this. You see that his gun is out of bullets. So instead, he gets out a grenade, throws it, and it's almost slightly ambiguous at first whether or not Charlie is dead. Because you see Charlie like kick back and
he like kicks the guy back, and then boom.
So I was like, did he actually just get the guy and Charlie's okay?
I think the ambiguity that was introduced there was supposed to be maybe Charlie could have escaped, like if it had been played differently by Joe, but I don't know.
I think that ambiguity is there because we get the very next scene is after the battle. Ben is looking for Ox and Charlie, and Joe says, they're right over there, and then you see the bodies. Okay, that's so that just for that momentary ambiguity.
Sure. The Pacific and Band of Brothers have ruined grenades for me because grenades in movies have they vary in terms of power. Like usually in movies they create like a fireball.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in Band of Brothers, you see a grenade like land next to someone, they hit the dirt, and the grenade goes off, and they're fine. Like they're not even hurt.
All right.
So I don't know how realistic this scene is based on that. My extensive knowledge of World War II from all these movies and TV shows.
I get the impression that a lot of like actual battle injuries are very ambiguous in a lot of ways, and this film does not particularly lean into ambiguity in its battle scenes. Like if someone's getting shot, they're getting shot like 6 times.
Right.
Like,
well, that's
doing, like,
that is
shuffle.
your classic John Woo.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess that's what I meant when I was saying it. It felt like a John Woo in that, like, there's a heck of a lot of, like, oh, if you're getting shot, like, you're getting riddled with bullets, and if you're, like, shooting the Japanese, like, you're blowing up 5 or 6 of them at once, you know? It's not like...
doesn't do anything halfway.
Yeah. Joe tells Ben that he killed Charlie. Ben, like, gets his gun out, points it at Joe, and Joe is like, go on, do it, do it. But Ben can't. So as they're walking to their next site, Chick is talking about how Charlie saved him.
Yeah, and we get a nice moment of introspection from him.
Yeah. How his grandfather talked about hunting Indians, and maybe in 50 years we'll be friends with the Japanese and drinking their sake and looking for someone else to fight.
Let's go find some aliens, fight them. Wait, what was that, CJ?
It's prophetic.
Ooh. Yeah. Now, is this better or worse than that scene at the end of what was that? When you're talking about prophetic stuff, the scene at the end of what's the movie about the Mossad?
Munich.
Munich, where they pan over to the Twin Towers.
That wasn't as blatant. Going back and watching Munich again, it wasn't as blatant as I
really that scene. That just
I
was
didn't
like
even
so...
pick up on that when I saw the movie, so it can't have been.
Wow, okay.
Or either I'm a lot dumber than I think,
or maybe you just dove for the remote control when you saw the credits, like I usually do.
We saw it in theater.
It's hilarious how many times Zach has missed post-credit scenes in these movies.
Yeah. It's not a Marvel movie. I don't expect them.
I have to make sure I should tell you the next time there is one.
Please do.
So I actually thought that this scene was was one of the stronger. Oh, look at how racism is in the time period, because like the guy talking about how his grandfather had literally hunted Indians to sell their ears for $3 each, and like contrasting with, oh wait, like now we're actually fighting the same people and helping each other out and saving each other. It felt like a very real. In that, like, I could see that moment getting through to this guy who's like, a lifer Marine, and now all of a sudden he's realizing, wait a minute, these Indians are Marines, and it's kind of causing tension in his internal, I guess, outlook on the world. So that felt, and I felt like it didn't shy away from kind of the brutal past of this either. It wasn't like,
True.
Particularly whitewashing history.
It also, the part that, well, not that you're leaving out, but the other part of that is the we'll be fighting someone else because we have to be fighting someone else.
Oh, it's what they do, yeah.
Yeah.
The Civil War wasn't that long ago in 1945.
Yeah.
There were probably people alive who had fought in it.
Ben, who's tying Charlie's knife to his leg, he's performing a ceremony, and he reveals that he talked Joe into coming. He performs a ceremony, and he reveals that he talked Charlie into coming, and if not for him, Charlie would be, back in Arizona probably. And at this point, Joe reveals his orders that he's supposed to be, that he's protecting the code, not necessarily protecting Ben.
Right.
So Gunny wants to see Joe. They apparently need to take the mount, and that's after that they'll have basically taken all of Saipan. But they're and the Navy bombed the heck out of the mountain, but they still want someone to go up and check to make sure there's no more resistance. So they go up the mountain. As they're walking, they notice some mines. So they're supposed to go single file after Chick, as he's the first person. But Mark Ruffalo's freaking out. And Ben like goes ahead, outside of the single file line because now he's a changed person.
Yeah,
He's
now
tougher.
he's the maniac.
Yeah. And as this is going on, the Japanese fire on them. There's a bunch of falling bodies that activate mines, so they just keep exploding.
So much explosions, yeah.
Ben is trying to, run ahead, get in front, get away from Joe. Because he's a hardened, crazy man now.
So this part reminds me of Hot Shots Part Duh.
Oh.
When Charlie Sheen has the gun, and it's like kill count, and it just keeps rising.
Yeah, it really does feel like that.
Yeah.
Mm.
So there's also tanks from the 8th Division. Don't know what their unit names are. They just keep saying the 8th. Coming up the mountain, we see that Gunny gets hit. Ben is going all commando. He's taking out tons of Japanese soldiers. And in one of the things I've noticed in John Woo movies, there's always a thing about sort of mirroring or mirror images. So this is very much in the mirror image of Joe from the beginning.
Yes.
So Joe goes after him to try to make sure he's safe, and we find out that Gunny's dead. He's leaving Joe in charge. And again, mirror situations. This is similar to the situation in the beginning, where they're all of a sudden going, we don't know. I don't want to die, Joe. Don't make us go. Or you can't. And Joe promises no one else is going to die, and we're all going to make it out of there. So the Japanese are loading this big artillery cannon.
Oh yeah, it was huge.
Fire.
I like how they emphasized how giant this thing was. They go through the process of 4 guys have to carry the shell over, and then they have to load multiple powder charges, and then I thought that was great.
Yep. So that artillery cannon is taking out all the soldiers coming up the mountain. So they need to call in the flyboys.
This was cool. It was like one last code to win the battle. One more code.
Joe goes to get a radio, and he says everyone to cover him. And Ben is taking a lot of Japanese soldiers out with Charlie's knife. And as he's doing so, he almost stabs Joe. Joe's like, "It's not going to bring your friends back." And
it's like, you should be telling that to Joe.
Yeah, Ben's like, "What do you know about friends?"
Ew.
And then as soon as that happens, because this movie's not subtle, Joe saves Ben from artillery fire.
Mm-hmm.
But they both get shot in the leg.
So this reminded me of the Last Stand perk in Call of Duty. Do you guys remember Call of Duty? So one of the things you would do, if there's a perk you get where if you get killed, you hit the ground and pull a pistol out, and then you can fight until someone kills you.
Yeah. But Ben manages to get on the radio, calls in the airstrike, and they try to get out there. Or let me start that again. They try to get out of there, but they're both surrounded. And so Ben tells him, "All right, I know how this goes. Just get over with it." Points Joe's gun at him, but instead Joe gets up, throws Ben over his shoulder, and just hauls ass.
Did you guys really think at any time that Joe was actually going to shoot Ben?
Well, I didn't think he was going to shoot him, but I thought that Joe might have died, or Ben might have died. Yeah, I thought Ben might have died.
Yeah. And they fall close to the trench, but Chick goes to get them. Mark Ruffalo is providing suppressing fire, and the bombers come in.
Yay.
Well, they're fighters. Fighter bombers.
Yeah. They bomb the place. That's what it sounds.
Look, we got one CGI plane.
We're going to use it.
Yep. All right. So Ben is laughing because they made it, but he looks over at Joe, who has been hit in the chest, and Ben tells Joe, "We saved a lot of Marines today." And Joe apologizes about Charlie. We get the classic blood in the mouth, which means he's dying, and
he's done.
Starts saying a Hail Mary, and then dies.
I was hoping his last words would be something kind of more badass, but whatever.
Well,
Hail Mary's a badass way to go out, right?
Sure.
So Chicks finds them, and Ben takes Joe's dog tags, puts one on Joe's body, but takes the other one, and we go back to Arizona in the Monument Valley, where Ben is performing a ceremony to honor Joe. Ben's family's there, and he's telling his son about Joe and says, if anyone asks you to tell him about him, say he was my friend.
No conclusion with the nurse.
Yeah, I know.
Well,
she just gets dropped like a hot potato.
Well, she's got plenty of other flyboys.
Oh, Chris, that's terrible.
Well, I mean, yeah. What was in Pearl Harbor? They're trying to do the math on how many,
right, the ratio
soldiers that are at.
Yeah, I mean, I would have liked at least a shot of her with a letter looking sad. I mean, something. Come on.
Yeah, all right. But we get a end epitaph saying that the Navajo Code was very vital in his victory at Saipan and every major battle in the Pacific, and it was never broken.
That's right.
Alrighty, and that is the end of our movie.
Okay, so now it is time for our spy fact versus fiction. So I have a little bit, if you want me to go first.
I'll go first.
Okay.
Because I have less. I think I mentioned this earlier before, but most of this movie was filmed in Hawaii at Kualoa Ranch. I think on other parts of the island as well. So there's a part, when Ben is going under disguise as a Japanese soldier, and Joe tells him what the Japanese word for prisoner is, which he says is horoyoda, which I couldn't find that as a translation for prisoner. What I found was the most common was shunjin. So I was like, that's interesting. I wonder where that word came from. And that's what I've got. So I hope you have more, Zach.
Yes, I do. So recently I went to the National Cryptological Museum in Fort Meade, Maryland, and they had a little bit about the code talkers. So one of the things I learned there is that code talkers existed before World War II. There's a part in the movie, this kind of throwaway line where they're like, the Marine Corps have come up with this new idea for a code based on the Navajo language. It was not a new idea. So BBC 2014, World War I, the original code talkers. In the autumn of 1918, the U.S. was involved in the Meuse-Argonne offensive on the Western Front. The Germans had tapped their telephone lines, but then they came upon the solution by accident. They overheard a conversation between two Choctaw soldiers, and they realized that it could be turned into a code. So they created something called the Choctaw Telephone Squad was born, and so was code talking. Within hours, 8 speakers had been dispatched and helped them win several key battles. A machine gun was little gun shoot fast, and battalions were indicated by the number of grains of corn, and it created a code within a code. But it was only in 2008 that the Code Talkers Recognition Act was passed in the U.S., recognizing the hundreds of overlooked code talkers from different tribes, including the Navajo and the Choctaw. And according to the Crypto Museum, the reason why it took so long to recognize them is because the U.S. military wanted to use it again in another war, potentially.
What?
But Reagan signed the Navajo Code Talker Act into effect in 1982, so I think that the original recognition of them was in 1968 when it was declassified.
Okay. Well, in that case, the reason why they waited until 1968 is because they thought about using it in another war.
Yes.
Okay. So you just had your timelines a little off.
And then I also have something briefly. Windtalkers, Breezes, Past Inaccuracies by William Arnold, writing for the Seattle Post-Intelligencer movie critic. So he says the whole imperative of the film that we could lose the war if any Navajo is captured is basically false. Japan was on its knees in late 1944. Saipan already was won when most of the film's action takes place. At one point, an officer reaching into his pocket and taking a silver star out and giving it to him is not true. And then finally, something that the movie does not include was the most infamous incident of the Saipan invasion, the suicide of hundreds of fearful Japanese civilians at the Banzai Cliff, which he compares to making a movie about the Crimean War and leaving out the charge of the Light Brigade. I mean, that would have been a real downer if it was in the movie.
Yeah, it wasn't the story. They weren't telling a story about Saipan, though. They were telling a story about the Code Talkers.
Right. So that's William's thoughts. And that is all I have for Spy Fact versus Fiction. ZJ, how about you?
Let's see. I didn't come prepared for this, so I would have to make some stuff up. I feel like there was something you were saying about the World War I, which I read about also. What was it? That apparently the reason that code talkers weren't used as extensively in Europe is that Nazi Germany had actually sent a bunch of social scientists to study Native American languages, who they had declared were Aryans, and so
what
there was a fear in the U.S. that there would be a number of Nazis who could have spoken or understood the Native American languages.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and then once the Nazis learned it, then they would have just told the Japanese about it.
Well, no, they didn't. They didn't talk
Not
all that often.
necessarily.
It was a bit of a long trip.
Yeah, they're kind of lazy. That's interesting.
I don't know. I feel like the action scenes weren't trying to be realistic action scenes, so I feel like any critique of them is going to be misguided.
You can do it anyway if there's something real you want to get off your chest.
Let's see. I think that when they land on the beach and jump out, they jump out of one of the like tracked landing vehicles, which is pretty cool. But we didn't see much of them after that, which I was disappointed about. We just kept seeing the same Sherman and and Stewart, which they seemed to really like. But there were some other cool vehicles in there too. So someone had a great time procuring those. I'm sure of it. And they seem to actually care about which vehicles they put in, which is interesting when they then get to, the USS Iowa bombarding as the... And did you guys both hear California as well?
I don't remember the name of the ship that fired.
They say it on... They show it on screen. They say the USS California.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Because this would be a fun little section, which is factual errors with the factual errors section on IMDb. Because they say the ship is identified as USS Colorado, and then have talk about the number of main guns on the Colorado's turrets, which is interesting because apparently the USS California was actually the battleship that would have been there. And it's interesting that they picked out the number of guns on the turret, which actually would have been correct between the Iowa and the California. So I don't know what's going on there, but someone's got their wires crossed.
All right.
I do have... Well, that is interesting, and I guess, it's interesting because I think Iowa is currently a museum ship in, like, California somewhere.
Yeah, I think that's right.
It was...
San Diego? Is it?
Somewhere in I think like Long Beach.
Long Beach, that's right.
Yeah. Do you have an idea where the location? What happened to the California? Is it a museum ship or did it?
No, it got scrapped.
Okay.
It was one of the pre-war U.S. battleships. So it would have been built in 1917 or something. And all of those except one got scrapped, and the one that got saved is the USS Texas, which you can see, surprisingly enough, in Texas.
Wow.
The USS Texas is actually the only extant dreadnought battleship in the world, so it is well worth seeing for that reason alone. But
what part of Texas?
I think it's around Corpus Christi. I would have to double check.
Have you seen it, ZJ?
No, I wish.
We'll have to go.
Yep.
All right. Okay, now it's time for our favorite quotes. So in the beginning, when they were all fighting and the Solomon Islands, I laughed when Nicolas Cage goes, "Watch out." That's very helpful advice when you're in a war. And then later, when his friends die, he does a "no," which is great. Classic Nicolas Cage. There's a part where someone says about the Navajo, "I wouldn't get too friendly." I like that. It's kind of like you don't even want to know their names from the Pacific. When they're using the flamethrower, someone says, "Torch the box." Or maybe that was the satchel charge. But then I think my favorite quote, unfortunately, I forget the context, but someone says, "Maybe we all did," in a reference to maybe none of us survived. I don't know. I don't remember the context, but I thought it was
it was Joe. No, it was Joe telling. It was after Ben reveals that he convinced Charlie to come, and then Joe says, "Maybe you made a mistake," and then Ben says, "Maybe we all did."
Yeah, so that was a cool line. Thank you, Christian, for remembering the context.
Yeah. All right. So I've got a few. I've got, I think this is, I don't remember if it was Joe or Ox who says, "This ain't a democracy, Sergeant, it's the Marines."
Mm-hmm. It's not.
And then Charlie and Ben talking, "How's your white man?" "Hungry," after he spilled his drink all over his food.
Yeah, that was clever.
I also have, "What do you mean light? No resistance is light."
Mm-hmm.
And then when talking about the sake, "It ain't Chianti, I'll tell you that."
What's Chianti?
It's a type of wine.
Okay.
Have you never seen Silence of the Lambs? That's the kind of... All right, ZJ, what do you got?
All right, so I like when they're on the radio and they're talking, and they kind of have little flourishes that they're signing off with. And just, I think that he's just like saying, remember, Marine, ours is not to question why, ours is but to do or die, semper fi, over. And I like that that's just kind of like, you know, that feels very much like something you would just chat with someone shooting the shit over the radio when you're the only people who can talk to each other.
Yeah. In my experience with soldiers, that's definitely something they would say a lot.
Yeah. And then another line I did like was when Charlie says, I've never seen so many white men. And he says, oh, they've never seen so many Navajo. And I like that.
Okay, so now it is time for our ratings on a scale of 1 to 10 martinis, 1 being Avengers 1997 and 10 being even better than No Time to Die or Taken. How do we feel about Windtalkers? ZJ, as our guest, would you like to go first?
But remind me of the criteria, Zach.
There is no criteria. It's however you feel.
So just on a scale of 1 to 10.
Right.
And while generally we like to judge it as a spy movie, because we are a spy movie podcast, but, you know, that is up to your discretion.
All right. If I'm judging it as a spy movie, I'm going to go with a 3 out of 10. I think that as a spy movie, they didn't focus really on the spy aspects at all. They focused on Joe Enders, who wasn't even a Navajo code talker. And I guess that he had the central dilemma of whether or not to execute the person to save the code, but that just didn't feel as compelling of a central dilemma to me as the actual code talking itself. I think also the movie was way too long and not too good. So that combination lowers it in my eyes.
So what you're saying is you don't want us to bring you back next week to cover the director's cut, which is what did I say, 153 minutes?
Oh my god. No, thank you.
Yeah, that's not happening.
With more blood and gore, that's not my thing. But in terms of other war movies with Nicolas Cage, you know what ship was at the Battle of Saipan? The USS Indianapolis, which is also a film starring Nicolas Cage.
Right.
Really? I don't think I've seen that.
Yeah, well, they used the USS Alabama as the stand-in for the Indianapolis, which,
of course.
But
all right, Zach, you want to go next?
So yeah, I'm going to rate it slightly higher. I was pretty disappointed about how little there was about the Code Talkers, but the action scenes were exciting. It felt long, but it's an epic movie, so I don't know. It's not that bad. I'm gonna give it a 4 out of 10. Like it's below average, but it's. I don't know, it's okay. I like the characters. There's not too much more to say about it than that.
Yeah. All right. So this was an interesting one for me. Movies that are either filmed or set in Hawaii always get a tiny bit of a boost from me. This felt so similar to Pearl Harbor in the ways, but it felt like the least John Woo movie of any of the John Woo movies I've seen. It felt like, so I've been going on a binge, I did a binge of basically all the Christopher Nolan films, like or at least the ones I hadn't seen before. And, you know, you have all the elements of your Christopher Nolan's, even in his very first movie, of like time manipulation and, you know, and crime and that sort of stuff. But then there's one that just stands out, which is Insomnia, which is like just a generic studio picture. You don't get any of that usual stuff that makes it a Christopher Nolan film. And I think that's the equivalent of this movie for John Woo films. It is like the least. Yes, it does have some of John Woo's more excesses in terms of like how many times a person gets shot or is some slow motion, but it doesn't have doves. There's no people, you know, dual wielding guns, flying through the air, and any of that sort of stuff. So it's like almost a standard. This could be a Michael Bay studio picture.
It totally is a studio picture. You're right.
It's which disappoints me, because if you're seeing a war film from John Woo, you expect something different. So I liked it. I think slightly more than you guys, because of the Hawaii bump, but also because it in some ways resembles Pearl Harbor. But it is also just not a subtle film. So I'm gonna say just 4.5 stars.
All right. 4.5 martinis.
Oh yeah, martinis. 4.5 martinis.
Or whatever. 4.5 stars works too.
I've been on. I just joined Letterboxd, so I'm thinking of everything in stars. Although their his rating is 5 stars, but yes, 4.5 martinis.
All right. So, anything else you guys want to talk about? ZJ, do you have anything you want to plug?
Nope, I don't think so.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us, ZJ. Thank you for your insights on the various types of planes and ships and so on.
Thank you, Zach.
Well, thank you all for joining us. You can find us on social media at the Spy-Fi Guys on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and our merch store at redbubble.com. Until next time, I'm Christian.
And I'm Zach.
And we are the Spy-Fi Guys, signing off.
Thank you for listening to the Spy-Fi Guys. If you enjoyed our podcast, please be sure to give us a 5-star rating on iTunes. The theme song from this podcast is Mistake the Getaway by Kevin MacLeod from Incompetech.com, licensed under Creative Commons by Attribution 3.0. Films, books, and television shows reviewed by our podcast are the intellectual property of their respective copyright holders, and no infringement is intended.
This is a personal podcast. Any views, statements, or opinions expressed in this podcast are personal and belong solely to the participants. They do not represent those of people, institutions, or organizations that the participants may or may not be associated with in a professional or personal capacity unless explicitly stated. Any views or opinions are not intended to malign any religion, ethnic group, club, organization, company, or individual.
You can find our podcast on social media at The Spy-Fi Guys on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.